Hey everybody, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and with me as always is my co-host Danny Gillette, and we're back here for another episode, and we've got a lot to cover this week as we've got the new Big Ten scheduling format and the schedule for the 2024 and 2025 seasons released, and we got a lot of recruiting news. A new commitment last night as Mario Buford is in, so that's another blue chip addition for the 2024 class, but I want to start off with this new schedule, Danny. And what did you think about this new kind of format from the Big Ten? Nebraska only wound up getting one protected rival, which is Iowa, which kind of makes sense. I was surprised how that worked out. But just what were your first impressions of the new format for the Big Ten and also Nebraska's schedule the next 2 years?
Well, my opinion for the schedule for the next few years is that they better be ready by 2025. I mean, we have Maryland, Minnesota, Ohio State, and USC. I mean, boy, that is quite the gauntlet. I mean, 2024 is not exactly easy either. As Nebraska also has um, Iowa, Northwestern, Penn State, Purdue, and UCLA. And so, I think this is going to be a challenge for Nebraska, but I think they'll be ready. And I kind of talked about this yesterday on Husker Big Red. Um, when you look at Tony White and how he's kind of the recruiter for the West Coast, having these West Coast games is obviously going to be a chance for Nebraska to continue to try to make inroads in that area and also kind of give the western part of the country a chance to see Nebraska football. Because sure, they see it on TV. Sure, these California kids, some of them have even come here, but to establish a presence more in California is going to be big for Nebraska football and for the rest of the Big Ten as far as recruiting goes.
Yeah, I really like what the Big Ten did in terms of their, whatever they called it, Flex Plus or whatever. I don't even care what they called it, but it makes so much more sense than the garbage that the SEC put out. I mean, that was crap, and the fact that like in the SEC that Georgia and Texas A&M have been in the same conference and haven't played in over a decade. They're not even in the same conference. Then why are they even in the same league? It does not make any sense. And then the idea that the SEC, oh, we can protect more rivalry games by playing fewer conference games. That's just a lie. You want to play fewer games because you think it'll be easier. So just say that. But anyways, the Big Ten, the Big Ten with its 9-game schedule and the way that they did it, every team is going to play each other in these first 2 years, and I think that's how it's pretty much always going to be. I think you're going to see. I don't know that it's going to be within 2 years, but I don't think you're going to go 2 years without like more than 3 years without playing a team. So I do like that aspect of it. And that you're going to get all these, Nebraska's going to get to UCLA and USC basically, once every 4 years at a bare minimum. The protected rivals thing too, I think was smart because it instead of forcing rivalries, instead of trying to say, hey, like UCLA and Nebraska, you're going to be a rival. They protected 11 rivalries. I think there was too many. Iowa has too many protected rivalries, in my opinion, but Nebraska maybe could have had more. But that's the thing about it. I mean, yeah, Wisconsin and Minnesota both made sense to me, but those aren't, you're still going to play those teams. Iowa's really the only true rival, I think, that, for Nebraska, at this point. So that makes sense. It does kind of stink as a Nebraska fan in some ways, just because, I mean, I guess it could be a positive or a negative because Nebraska is going to get put in a lot of these marquee games, right? They've only got one protected rival. So you're going to see like in 2024, Nebraska is the only team that's playing, or 2025, excuse me, USC, UCLA, Michigan, and Ohio State in one schedule. I mean, that's a pretty brutal schedule, but that's what you're going to see happen. And Penn State too, because Penn State has 0 protected rivals, so they're really gonna, get matched up. But it's smart because basically, look, if you put Nebraska against almost anybody, it's going to be a good draw, whether it's in-person attendance or TV. And you can say the same thing about Penn State. So that is really smart because basically, like if you got Nebraska on the schedule, the game will get sold out because if the home fans won't go, Nebraska fans will buy them up. I mean, that whether that's in Rutgers, whether that's in UCLA, I mean, wherever it is. And Nebraska fans are going to watch too. So we're going to get some marquee games. And as Trev Alberts has said, he's like, hey, sign me up for those night games. So it's going to be, I think, a fun time. But yeah, 2025 is going to be a very difficult schedule. But hopefully we're up and rolling by then.
but they're not running away from competition. They're not scheduling, the animal hospital welfare university type of school. They're playing conference opponents. They're not afraid to play competition, and I think that's exactly the type of thing that will help this program grow, even if there may be some, lopsided defeats along the way. I mean, I think it'll only serve to help the players get better and help the coaching staff realize, what they need to do to get this program to continue to grow and get to the next level.
And honestly, by year 3, I think Nebraska will be quote unquote back by then. I really believe that. Like, I'm not saying we're going to be, in the national, but I think Nebraska is going to be like a top 25 program by then. I really think that Matt
Yeah.
Rule is going to. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I don't think that the rebuilding job here is as steep as everybody's made it out to be. I really don't. I don't think it's going to take that much for Nebraska to be a top 6 program in the Big Ten. Now, is there some work to get into the top 3 where like Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, USC are? Yes, there's a lot of work to get there. But to get where Minnesota has been, it just takes a competent head coach. And it's going to happen this season. And I think by 2024 and by 2025, when in the Big Ten, coaches were just talking about how Nebraska is a sleeping giant. Well, Matt Rule is the man to wake this program up. And so by 2025, I think people are going to be not that excited to play Nebraska either, in my opinion.
And I think people were so used to incompetency in terms of head coaching and Scott Frost and things like that, that they thought it would take a while to rebuild the program because they hadn't seen a coach like Matt Rule, or a coach, not even Matt Rule, just a coach with drive and, purpose and a vision. Now that we have a coach like that in Matt Rule, I mean, things don't seem as far off. I mean, I think we kind of forgot along the way what it's like to have a coach that has an energy that can revitalize a program, along with a coaching staff that is cohesive and, is on the same page. That's the big thing too, because we had, so many different assistants last year with so many different agendas, and you could see it on the field. So I think we just, kind of missed that aspect of cohesiveness, and now that it's here, things don't seem so far-fetched.
Yeah, and it's the Big Ten schedule is going to be interesting, but and another thing too is after this season, it's going to be the 12-team playoff. It's going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays into it. I'm hoping that the committee or whatever is finally going to hold the SEC accountable, because they're playing the weakest schedule out there. I mean, there's no real debate about that. It's you never see Georgia and Alabama play each other. I mean, it's like the SEC is purposely they're screwing fans for one thing by not playing marquee games, and they're also making it easier for their teams to get to bowl games in the playoff and whatever. So, I mean, I like that the Big Ten is doing it the way that they're doing it. I will say the one thing I think is stupid, and I hate it, and they need to get rid of it. It's the Big Ten championship game has got to go. I mean, because what's going to happen is you're going to have Michigan, Ohio State play the last week of the regular season, and then they're going to play again in the championship game, and that is going to utterly ruin that game.
That's what happened last year. Or did that happen last year?
No, it hasn't happened last year because they had the divisions, so
That's
they were
right,
in the
that's-
same division. But yeah, if you had the way the rules worked, those two teams basically would have met the last 2 years, 2 weeks in a row. And what's the point of that? So you have to beat a team 2 weeks in a row to win I mean, that makes no sense. So like last year, Michigan went to Ohio State and beat them by 23 points, and then you have to beat them again the next week on a neutral field to win the conference championship. That makes no sense to me at all. And then if, say, turn around, Ohio State beats Michigan, well, now both teams have won a game against each other, but Ohio State's the conference champion, even though they got it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that, honestly, if it wasn't for the only reason to have a conference championship game is money at this point, there's no other reason for it. Once you get to a 12-team playoff, you don't need it for playoff berths. I mean, it's like it just makes no sense. And so I really hope it probably will never happen, but I hope that they get rid of the conference championships. I think that I don't think that they serve a point at all in the 12-team playoff era, to be honest.
Well, and you talk about, the conference championship, having for example, Ohio State and Michigan play, twice in back-to-back weeks also takes away from, a little bit of the excitement of the rivalry games after Thanksgiving too, and that's always a fun game after Thanksgiving. I mean, it doesn't take away all the excitement, but it just it probably makes everybody realize, okay, we can celebrate, but we have one more game to get through next week. So I agree. I don't think the Big Ten championship game should be played anymore, and I'll be interested to see, how this works with the 12-team playoff because, quite frankly, I think it's going to be, heavily SEC favorite. I mean, they I saw a post the other day, and this is obviously true, that Georgia's first home game is going to be under the lights against UT Martin at 8 p.m. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, that's the first home game? Like, come on now. Like, this is ridiculous. You're basically with opponents like, and I'm sorry, but opponents like UT Martin and, you know, schools like that, Chattanooga, whatever the heck, you're basically guaranteeing these SEC schools another shot at, the college football playoff, and it's the same shit, different day, and it's just boring. It's boring. It's kind of the antithesis of what the college football playoff was originally intended for.
Well, and I thought the point of, the big bad SEC is you guys are such a, if you're such a great conference and your football is so much better, why are you afraid to play 9 games in a why are you playing these FCS? You should be scheduling 10 Power 5 opponents. Check that. You should be scheduling 12 Power 5 opponents every single year. If the SEC is so bad, why are you guys not even playing, 9 Power 5 games? It's pathetic. And it's weak. I mean, to sit there and have, to not schedule Georgia and Alabama every single year because you don't want to ruin your chances of both of them making. That's why they do it. Don't tell me it's some random, we got to protect these rivalry games, blah, blah, blah. No, you're scheduling to make it so your teams can make the playoff. And that's what the SEC does. It's crap.
And it's also hurting the fans. I mean, they want to see good games too. And I would definitely tune into a Georgia Alabama game and things like that. Can you imagine, the Alabama fans if the game was in Tuscaloosa, or the Georgia fans if the game was in Athens? Like, that place would be rocking. Both those places would be rocking. So it's just a disservice to the fans as well. And I understand, money and ratings and all that, but it's really kind of not helping anybody.
Well, and Georgia isn't even playing like LSU this year. So they're not playing. They didn't play LSU last year outside of the title game. They didn't play Alabama last year. So it's like you basically just make it so that Georgia never has to play anybody decent from the West because they have their rivalry game with Auburn. It's like, so you guys just, it's a joke. And what's the point of Texas being in the SEC? Like, if you're not going to see them on the schedule, that's why I like what the Big Ten did. And I think that the Big Ten actually has a clue, but the SEC works for its own self-interest, and it has worked out for them. But I guess
not in the SEC though. Oh, I was going to say Mario Buford, but we can do Carter Nelson first if you want.
Well, we can go back to, I was going to say,
let's
more
start
SEC.
with the good news. Let's start with the good news because the Carter Nelson crystal ball, I don't know about that one. That doesn't have me exactly feeling warm and fuzzy. But Mario Buford had me excited last night. Texas native, 4-star corner, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. And, I kind of wrote about this on HuskerBigRed.com last night. I really like his play style. He's 5'11", which is a bit small, but he has a ton of speed on the outside. He can cover really well. And even if he gets beat on a play, he doesn't really give up on a play. He's got great instincts, and I think he is the perfect fit for that 3-3-5 defense because you want to have, the kind of base of the 3-3-5 defense is good corner play and having a good secondary. And I think Buford will definitely bring that to the table. I mean, I don't think that, this was let's get a 4-star kid to get a 4-star kid. I think this was definitely a scheme fit. I could see where he fits in this defense because of his instincts and that speed. And I think he has a chance to be a really, really good player. And I'm so happy that Nebraska was able to land him, another Texas kid. So, I'm really happy with that on Thursday night. And I can't wait to see how he fits in this defense.
Yeah, just another solid athlete. He has run the 200. He long jumps, so he fits the Matt Rule profile there. His brother obviously is on the team. And he's the number one. He's the top ranked recruit in Nebraska's class right now, and they've only got 2 blue chips. 2 out of 8 right now are ranked as 4 stars. So obviously that number you want to see that number improve. The best teams in college football are above 50%. Nebraska's at 25. So, I mean, they've got definitely, a lot of work to do there over the next few years. I mean, I would not expect that number to be anywhere probably above 20% this cycle. But Mario Buford is a really good get out of DeSoto, Texas. I mean, that's like the 4th recruit out of Texas now, I believe, in this class. I'm sure that we'll see more, coming from Texas. But yeah, it was a good pickup, and that was they hit it out of the park with the official visits last weekend. And Mario Buford was supposed to take visits to Michigan State and Penn State, and he didn't and committed. So a nice job from Matt Rule and company, and I do think that we're going to see hopefully some more commitments, coming out of that first visit weekend. There's not really anybody coming to campus this weekend except for just to touch on it quickly, you said that, you reported this on HuskerBigRed.com. Isaiah McMorris will be visiting this weekend with Daniel Kaelin, which is going to be important. These are unofficial visits. McMorris' official is on June 23rd, which is the same as Daniel Kaelin and Carter Nelson, along with some other, pretty important targets. But it's good to get him back on campus. I know he was, in his interview, he talked about, USC and Oklahoma, and Davon Hall talked about Tennessee. So I don't know. It seems to me, I'm worried with Hall and McMorris if Oklahoma or USC decides to push, or if Tennessee decides to actually extend an offer. But, save those things happening, I think Nebraska's in a pretty good situation.
And I think if we land Hall, we don't land McMorris, and vice versa. I think we have a better shot with McMorris right now, honestly.
Yeah.
I think Saturday it's going to be about seeing how Garrett McGuire coaches. Is kind of what I got from uh, why he's coming to visit Saturday. Daniel Kaelin's been a very strong peer recruiter, always on Twitter trying to get his classmates to come to Nebraska. So I'm not going to say anything's going to happen Saturday because I don't think it will, but it's always good to get McMorris back on campus, and I think it speaks a lot to the job that Garrett McGuire has done, and just constantly trying to get McMorris to come to campus, keeping in contact with him, kind of going through the recruiting process. So this can only be mean good things in my opinion for Nebraska, and I'm excited to see what happens on the 23rd.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I do think Nebraska has a better shot with McMorris. They offered a new wide receiver this week, so I don't know what that says about Davon Hall. And I guess we should say, I have to admit, I didn't realize this with Galen Bear, but he's not going to be joining anybody till 2026 because he's taking a 2-year Mormon mission.
Yeah.
So that kind of, it's like, cool, you get him now. To me, that dramatically changes. I see you still want to recruit him, but I mean,
I had forgotten about that, honestly, until you just said that, but I remember reading that. I mean, and now I can see why, he's not like I'm freaking out less about the fact that he hasn't visited or isn't going to visit for a while, because 2 years is a long way away in the recruiting world. Our whole board could look different by then.
Even if he commits, he could, because Michigan just had a guy that Andrew Gentry, I think he signed with Stanford or BYU or somebody out of ice, or maybe he didn't even, I don't remember, but he was like 2 classes behind, and then he went on his mission and came back. And so the thing about it is, like, I think Galen Bear is an incredible athlete, but he's not going to come in 2026 after a 2-year Mormon mission of not playing football and make an impact. So 2027 is the, basically, so this guy's not going to play for 3 years. So, I mean, I still love his recruitment, and, maybe he would change his mind. I don't know, but that drastically changes, like what the board looks like, or even landing him, because it's like, yeah, is he still going to want to, if he signs this year, is he still going to want to come to Nebraska or wherever in 2 years? So, but at any rate, I do think that the receiver board is interesting, and I do think there's a chance to get McMorris on board, but that Oklahoma is the team that's kind of looming large for me, because I know that they were in the mix at one point. So, and I know that some things have kind of gone awry on their receiver board. So I'm wondering if they might circle back to like McMorris or Hall. At any rate, another thing I did want to mention, you brought it up with Carter Nelson, the crystal ball this week. And I don't know, it's the Kip, I can't remember what his name, Kip Adams, I believe, is the Georgia insider for 24/7. So just, I mean, it's not like, Carter Nelson's trending with a bunch of picks. This guy put in like 6 predictions for Georgia recruits that visited that weekend all at the same time, like 5 stars and stuff, and all with the same confidence level. So, I mean, it's not like, I'm not saying it's not legitimate or there's not reason for it, but it's not like it's not a Steve Wiltfong.
Locked in. Yeah, he's not locked
it's
in.
not like a Brian Christopherson or, Sean Callahan. Those would give me, I mean, this guy has got a 79% hit rate in his career. So, I mean, he's missed, the better ones are up in the high 8. So what that tells me is he's a bit of a homer, kind of like Tom Loy of the Notre Dame site. It's like when Tom Loy puts in a prediction for Notre Dame, you take notice, but you're also like, yeah, Tom Loy's a huge homer. So you kind of take that into account. So I am taking that into account here with, this Kip Adams guy. I'm not taking a shot at him in any way. There just hasn't been any other reporting. Now, looking at what Carter Nelson has said, I do understand it a little bit. Georgia wants to take him with the 2 tight end thing. And he's not worried about it at all, probably because he thinks he's going to be a first round pick someday. So, and I could definitely see that. I think he has that kind of ability, at least a day 2 draft pick. And so it would be hard. Like I said, in some of my posts, Georgia had 14 recruits ranked in the top 25 on campus last weekend. You know how many Nebraska had? 0. You know how many Nebraska is going to have this entire month? 1. Carter Nelson. That's it. So, I mean, you look at it from that perspective, you've got 5 of the top 9 players in the country on campus last weekend in Georgia, and most of them are going there. So it's like, I can see getting wrapped up in that and seeing how it's just a totally different thing than what Nebraska has going right now. And if he has a chance to be part of that and he wants to be part of that, it's kind of hard to blame him, honestly.
Yeah, who could blame him at all? I mean, at the end of the day, you want to get to the NFL, you want to win national championships at the collegiate level, and Georgia's the place to do that over Nebraska right now. And quite honestly, they probably will be for the next couple of decades. I'll probably be in the ground before Georgia, falls short of Nebraska. But anyway, I can't blame him at all. He would be a great get for Nebraska. I'm not necessarily expecting him to come to Nebraska. I'm already kind of preparing not to. And the other thing about these good tight ends is that they probably won't be around all 4 years. They'll probably go to the NFL. So I mean, he could have a shot at playing sooner rather than later. I mean, it's just hard to say no to a program like Georgia. It really is. And when we're up against Georgia or Alabama or any of those programs, it's an uphill climb. I mean, it really is. And
it's an uphill climb for anybody against Georgia.
And I just want to say I don't think that's any fault of Matt Rule or the coaching staff or whatever. I just really think it's an uphill climb when it comes to Georgia. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be that way for a while.
If you're Alabama and you're recruiting against Georgia, it's an uphill climb at this point. I mean, the recruiting class is insane. So
so I mean,
it's just what it is.
We'll just have to see what happens when he comes on the 23rd, and just continue to push and see if we can chip away. But again, I can't fault him for wanting to go to Georgia at all. And I definitely recognize that this is an uphill battle for the coaching staff.
I don't think it's over yet, though. I don't think it's over yet. He did.
I'm just kind of mentally preparing to be disappointed.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see how these next 2 visits go, and I think that that's where I kind of a lot of people in like Iowa wanted to make a lot about the Michael Byrd offer, like the Iowa guy being like, oh, after tight end U offers the guy, but I honestly think that might have more to do with Carter Nelson or with Eric however you pronounce his name, Ingwerson. Because Byrd is a pretty similar, if you look at him and Carter Nelson, they're pretty similar type of players in that they're not just like a, inline tight end, somebody that you put on the end of the line of scrimmage. I mean, you can split them out, move them around. Yeah. Michael Byrd's going to be visiting official visit to Nebraska on June 16th. So I think that's a really good development. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I'm not willing to throw in the towel yet on Carter Nelson. I remember when Malachi Coleman got crystal ball to Colorado and everybody was freaking out, and then Matt Rule turned it around. So I still think Matt Rule and the Huskers have a chance. And like I wrote the other day, I mean, this coaching staff with Carter Nelson, you can't fault them for anything that they've done. I mean, they've went to his basketball games, track meets. They went to Ainsworth numerous times. That was one of their first stops when Matt Rule got hired and went out to do recruiting visits. They've got him on campus numerous times. I mean, the spring game before, he was on campus a couple weeks ago with Kaelin. They're getting him for an official visit. So as far as like Nebraska doing its part, they did their part.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just
100%.
maybe the kid just doesn't want to come here, and maybe it's like he wants to leave Nebraska. That might, like you mentioned that before, and that could totally be a valid thing. So I feel good about the recruitment that the coaching staff, ran through, and if they don't get him, they don't get him. There's
Yeah,
nothing else that they
yeah,
could have done.
yeah. No, I totally agree, and I think that um, with the way that this tight end room looks right now, there's a chance for growth. And, you have a guy like Keelan Smith, for example, who could play either wide receiver or tight end. I mean, he's no Carter Nelson, and that's not a knock on him. Carter Nelson's really good. But there are options for Nebraska at the tight end position. Would I love to land Nelson? Absolutely. But it's not like we are barren at the position like we have been in years past. I feel a little bit better about the position now than I did even, at this time last year.
And yeah, Ian Flint is committed, and I like him. And
That's right. I forgot about you.
and then yeah, you add Smith, and then if you get Burt or Nelson, I think those are probably the two most likely options right now. And Burt's not going to be an easy recruitment to win either, because just about every team in the Big Ten offered him in like a span of 3 days.
Yep.
At least like every team in the Big Ten West that still exists. But
His
he's
stock
still,
rose quickly.
yeah, and he's a good player. He is a good player. So I agree with you. The tight end room is going to be just fine, and we'll see. It's not over yet with Carter Nelson, but something to keep an eye on. Nebraska's they still have their chance, and they got to knock it out of the park on June 23rd. But to end our last kind of thing, I did want to bring up something, because Tyson Terry, who is one of the top players in the state in the 2025 class, has been training to Nebraska. We got a bunch of predictions on Wednesday afternoon, or Thursday afternoon, excuse me, after Terrence Knighton and Omar, some of those guys were tweeting out, kind of the teasing that something good had happened. Brian Christopherson and Steve Wiltfong have joined with Crystal Ball, so it definitely seems like Tyson Terry maybe is silently committed, or is coming up with a commitment. I don't know. There's not been like a date or anything set, but that would be a huge development for Nebraska.
Yeah, it would give them a chance to develop a defensive line player in the program and not have to go through the transfer portal. And I think that's definitely something to be said for that as well. And Terry can move. He's fast. He's got a good inside, spin move, and he can get to the quarterback. He constantly pursues a play. He's never out of it. He can get to the backfield quickly. I mean, that's what you want out of a defensive lineman in a 3-3-5 defense. And so, landing Terry would be absolutely big for the defensive line. And I'm hoping that, they can, reel him in, because I remember he was being recruited back when Scott Frost was still here. I remember us talking back in October on one of these that, I think he was visiting last October or something. And it's good to see the staff continue to follow up with that recruitment and have some momentum, shift in their direction.
Yeah, and he's the thing about Tyson Terry too. I mean, he's listed at 6'2", 279 right now, and I'll tell you right now, I absolutely love defensive linemen that wrestle. He's a state champion wrestler, because you think about it, there's a lot of if you're going to be a good wrestler, especially a heavyweight like him, you've got to be really strong with your hands. You've got to know how to get low and use your body the right way. So a lot of that hand fighting that is so important on the defensive line, wrestlers are great at that type of thing, and they're great with leverage. So I really think this guy's going to be a standout player. I mean, he's already got offers from, Colorado, Iowa, Kansas State, Minnesota. I mean, I'm sure more offers are going to come in over time, even after he commits. And he's ranked 402 in the 24/7 Sports Composite rankings, which I think is fairly new. I didn't see that when I just looked at his ranking. 39th best defensive lineman. The number 3 player in the state of Nebraska. So, I mean, to get him on board now would be huge. And I want to say, I wanted to bring this up earlier, or I was thinking about this earlier, but Terrence Knight, man, he is doing a hell of a job recruiting defensive linemen. You look at Cameron Leonard, the last class, Princewell, Yuma Malian. You look at Tyson Terry, this class. They're in a good spot for Joseph Anderson and Carlin Jones. So, I mean, Terrence Knighton so far, at least in terms of the recruiting aspect of it, looks like a pretty good hire by Matt Rule.
Yeah, and I'm sure you remember him as a player as well. He was a pretty good football player.
Yeah,
so
pot roast, right?
Yep, pot roast. He played for the Panthers, I believe, and it's good to see a good player who also knows how to evaluate, because I mean, you even look on TV now, and you see all these analysts, big names, but they don't know how to talk football or baseball or whatever. They just played it. Not only can pot roast, not only did he play, but he can also evaluate talent. And just looking at the 2025 class, they already have a commitment from Caden Vermas, and he projects as a safety. So if they could get another player like Terry on the defensive side of the football, then that would be really, really good and a really, solid pair of recruits to start off the 2025 class. Because, it seems like once commitment train gets going and once the staff really starts working on a class, action seems to follow.
And I think you're right about the evaluation is such an important for Nebraska. You just can't miss on evaluations. You need to get the right 3-star players and the kind of 3-star players that can develop into an NFL draft pick, because there's a lot of those guys out there. You just need to find them, and I think Nebraska's doing a good job of that right now. We're not really going to know until we see these guys. It's a little bit like the NFL draft. I mean, we say we know, but we don't really know. But I trust what these coaches are seeing, and just the way that they kind of approach this process, I think, is really refreshing. And all of them,
Absolutely.
I think that Matt Rule, not only has he hired a team, I think, of guys that know football, but he's hired a coaching staff of recruiters. I mean, Garrett McGuire, Evan Cooper,
Ed
Terrence
Foley.
Knighton, Ed Foley. I mean, Matt Rule himself. Marcus Satterfield, I think, has done a nice job on the recruiting trail. I'd like to see Tony White get a little bit more involved, but he obviously has a lot to worry about with the defensive coordinator job. But I think we will see more of him later this year, and kind of probably it's hard for him to get much established in the 2024 cycle. You know what I mean? So I feel like he'll probably have a bigger role going forward in recruiting. But I feel really good about this coaching staff and what they can do on the field, and more importantly, what I think is more important, in the type of players that they can bring in on the recruiting trail.
And Tony White was a secondary recruiter for Mario Buford, actually. So, I mean, at least he had a hand in Thursday night's commitment. But I'd love to see Donovan
And maybe he's
Raiola.
just not as
Yeah,
vocal about it.
yeah. I mean, he seems like, you see him do interviews. He seems like a quiet guy, but it's not like a quiet guy, and he doesn't know what he's doing. He leads, I think, with action and example, and that's always a good thing. I'd love to see Donovan Raiola continue to kind of recruit a little bit more. I mean, he's landed a couple of commitments over the past couple months, but it's always good to have an offensive line coach who recruits offensive linemen. So I'd love to see him a little bit more involved, but overall, I really can't complain too much. And when I can't find something to complain about, things are going pretty well. So
Yeah, it's been a good little stretch. We'll see how things are going with Carter Nelson and everybody else, but we'll be making sure to keep you guys updated on Monday with our next podcast. We'll have lots of content on HuskerBigRed.com, so make sure you're checking out our website, and make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, get into the comment section, let us know what you think about Mario Buford or this new schedule, Carter Nelson, whatever. We want to interact with you guys out there at Husker Nation. So hit that button, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our podcasts or videos as we're moving toward the 2023 Nebraska football season. So anyways, I thought you wanted to say something, Danny.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, how many more days till the opener? I think we're 80-something.
80-something. We're getting pretty close to less than 80, so getting very close to it. Fall camp will be here like in less than 2 months. So
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy.
I'm excited for the first. I guess the fall camp. And Matt Rule is going to do the old school, the dorms, getting people in the dorms.
That's something we forgot to mention. I love it too. I honestly love it too, because it just continues, and this is something that was missed wholeheartedly with the Scott Frost staff. I mean, continues to kind of bring bonding and togetherness, and call that cliche BS all you want, but it matters on the field. I mean, and
it does.
And just like his energy matters to the players, like players can sense when you're feeding them BS. And I know you said that before, and things like that, but just having all the players together, a single focus, having a coaching staff that is really driven and really focused, and just acting like a football team matters. And putting everybody in the same dorm for a couple weeks, I think is a really strong strategy.
I think it is a really good idea, and you're right. Culture and that stuff. It does sound cliche and it does sound corny, but I can tell you one thing: I've been doing high school sports reporting for 14 years now, and every single team that I've ever seen that won a state championship, they had that culture. I've never seen a team that was a group of individuals that wasn't a good team win anything. And I've seen teams that had multiple like Division I players in Montana and not win anything because they didn't care about, they weren't together. They only
Yep.
cared about their own scoring averages or whatever. So I mean,
Yep.
it does matter. And you're right, they never had that it never felt like a true team under Scott Frost. And I don't think that that's going to happen under Matt Rule. And I do think just all those little things, that leadership and all that stuff, it does matter. So anyways, we'll have more great Nebraska content, you guys. I'm glad we got to touch on that. So let us know what you think. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.